last to speak here, but not least, is our friend John Noble, and I believe he's going to read a short statement from a friend of ours from GLF who couldn't be here tonight, Steve Dansky, who was a very important member of GLF that we all remember, and take it away.
Yes, I'm John Knable. Can you hear me? Yes? Good. I have the unenviable... You can't hear me.
Is your mic on?
I'll get even closer. How's that? Okay. So I have the unenviable position of being the last to speak here, and I thank you all for your patience and your not squirming too much. Yes, I do have a short 4-paragraph statement to read from one of our longtime members of GLF, Steve Dansky, who now lives in Las Vegas and was very sorry he couldn't be here this evening. It's just 4 paragraphs in length. Dear sisters and brothers, isn't that interesting? He started with the phrase you all said was good. It was not serendipitous that the first 4 words of the 1970 pioneering manifesto, Woman Identified Woman, were as follows: what is a lesbian? Or from my essay, meaning Stephen's own essay, Hey Man, also published the same year, in male homosexuality could be the first attempt at the non-assertion of cultural manhood. The trajectory of LGBT people during the first year after the 1969 Stonewall Rebellion was foremost a process along a historical continuum of establishing identity. Our transformation politically was comparable to others before us, notably women and people of color. The first year of the modern gay liberation movement was perplexing and contradictory. The often referred to anarcho-democratic structure of GLF guaranteed that the whirlwind of emotions at meetings, at times fratricidal in intensity, would denigrate into chaos. The above description is not unlike creative imagination, at least mine, the spontaneity of inspiration, unrestrained, struggling toward realization, initially undisciplined, then refined by vision into a work of art. So, Gay Liberation Front was a work of art, but placed us in history and established our authenticity as a people in the long march towards social justice. We forged the roots of activism with our particular audacity and went for complex reasons, insoluble tangles of events followed, some biomedical, some not. We stormed the gates. In 1970, we protested homophobia in front of St. Patrick's Cathedral, carrying signs proclaiming God is gay. And again, nearly 2 decades later, in 1989, many of us manifested as ACT UP, with more than 5,000 people protesting at St. Patrick's. There's a continuum. Back in August 1970, we demonstrated against police brutality throughout the village, surrounding the House of Detention on Greenwich Avenue, with women from the House of D shouting encouragement from their cells, dropping notes and lit pieces of paper that fluttered down in flames onto the street below. In 2007, new protesters, some holding rainbow flags, others chanting slogans, faced anti-gay reaction in front of Moscow City Hall. But it hasn't only been confrontation. With lesbian and gay studies offered in universities throughout the US, and our work being analyzed, interpreted, and examined, our posters, flyers, announcements, gay comic and coloring books, t-shirts, buttons, the work of the feminists, the photographs of Peter Hujar, Diana Davies, and Ellen Shumsky, Fran Winant's paintings, the novels of Perry Brass and Nikos Diamond, the anthologies of Carla J. and Alan Young, and so many others. So many acts of discovery drawn from everyday life, including day in, day out child care and child raising that defy control and disrupt the patriarchy. I was there, and now nearly 4 decades later, I'm still in awe of what we did. With greetings, love, and solidarity, Stephen Dansky. So for myself, just to be brief, like Perry Brass, I joined the Gay Liberation Front in November 1969, and I was fresh to New York City. I'd come to New York City to attend graduate school at NYU, and it was a strange time. It was a wonderful time in New York. We were all kind of gay hippies together.
Yep.
My first bar that I went to was called the Hippodrome, and it was on Avenue A, if anybody remembers that.
Brittop Hippodrome. Brittop Hippodrome.
Yeah, they were like...
I was a bartender there for the
Oh, well,
while.
I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Every Saturday night, we put on funny plays, and everybody would laugh. Allen Ginsberg would dance there. I mean, it was a crazy place. And that was also the year that the gay cruising area in the West Village had just moved. It used to be on the block on Greenwich Avenue, just past 6th Avenue, between 6th and 7th. That year, all the gay guys moved around the corner onto Christopher Street, the first 2 blocks where the Oscar Wilde bookstore was started. We used to sit there. I mean, you reminded me of this tonight. We used to sit there on the steps on summer nights. We hung out there. I mean, all these GLF people with the street people like Nova, etc. We used to hang out there on the 4 or 5 steps of those houses, and the police would come by with their billy clubs and make us move. And we'd get up and we'd walk to the next steps
Right.
and sit down, and then we'd come back again. Or we'd go around the block by Julius's, and then we'd come back and sit down again.
What
And
did
it
we
was-
call the police?
Pardon?
What did we call the police? Miss Lily.
Miss Thing, right.
Miss Lily.
So, those were crazy years. But I met a friend, and he said, because I talked about my radical day. I was from the University of Wisconsin, and we did so much anti-war protests in Madison, Wisconsin, that, we had so much tear gas. It was incredible. Sometimes I open up under my sink, and this odor comes up, and I get nostalgia for Madison. It's like chemicals, the old days. But he said, I belonged at GLF. I hadn't really heard of it. And so I went to my first meeting, and to my surprise, a woman in my class at NYU was the chairperson of the month. Carla J, her name was. That the only real order we had at our meetings is that we had a chairperson for the month whose responsibility was to call on people to speak and maintain order by banging a baseball bat on the wooden floor of the meeting hall. But tonight's forum is really about commemorating, I think, the first Gay Pride March, and I was just going to tell like a personal story that happened to me around that time. 2 nights before the first Gay Pride March, there was a gay dance at NYU at Weinstein Hall. That summer, the gay students did manage to pull off 3 gay dances before NYU canceled the gay dances, and we did a big sit-in in Weinstein Hall for about a week. But one was successfully held 2 nights before the first Gay Pride March. And about 1 o'clock in the morning, I left with 4 friends, and we were walking along 14th Street to the subway, and we were attacked. We were gay bashed. Some guys got out of a car, called us fags. 2 came up from behind, 2 came from in front of us. I was the first one. They grabbed me by the back of my belt, and they smashed my head onto the sidewalk. And one of my other friends' ankle was broken, and it was a big fight. I mean, it was quite a big bruisers beat us up. I'm a little guy. So passers-by were calling out, police, police, stop what's going on here. So the police came by, and they did stop it. And the fight had gone down the street. In fact, they couldn't find me at first because I was knocked out in the street. My head was in the blood was rushing down towards the curb. And the police said, well, when we see a street brawl, it's not up to us to see who started it. And all the witnesses, and we said, we got attacked. What are you talking about? You're all coming back to the station house with us. So actually, 2 of us had to go to Bellevue. I got 14 stitches in my head before I went back. About 3:30 in the morning, we arrived at the Charles Street station. And they said, you're going to have to stay here all night and go before the judge. We're going to put you in cells unless you want to file civil charges against each other. These gentlemen on the other side of the room are talking about how you harassed them, and they want to file charges against you. So he said, well, we'll certainly file charges against them. So they said, well, we'll give you their names and addresses, and you give us your names and addresses. And so we got out our driver's licenses, and they wrote down all our addresses. And we saw them doing the same with the folks across the bruisers across the room. Well, don't you know, they were all fake names and non-existent addresses. And when we got our lawyers to serve the subpoenas, they all came back. That's the kind of cooperation you got from the police in those days. 2 days later, I had the joy, though, of marching in the first Gay Pride March. I had a big, I have a lovely picture, which, I'll put it to the side, you can see it. I had a great big white bandage on my face, and we pushed our friend, Peter Ruffett, whose ankle was broken, on a wheelchair the entire length of the march. We weren't going to miss it. It looked to us, it was a funny evening. Yeah, it was a funny day. I mean, we marched up 6th Avenue. I don't know if people remember that. First march was from the Village up to Central Park to Sheep's Meadow, but it was so straggly because they didn't give us the whole street. We just had one side of 6th Avenue against where the cars were parked, and it kind of like straggled out for such a long way that even though sometimes the pictures show like clusters of people behind banners and stuff, when you were actually in the march and I was sort of toward the front of it, it felt like we're just like we're kind of small, like the turnout wasn't very good, and it was a little, what's happening here? However, this is not just my experience, but I've read it in books and Fran Winant's poem. The thing is, what happened is when we arrived at Sheep's Meadow at the far end, there was a little knoll, a little hill that you went up at the far end. We were walking across the grass, and we're just kind of like talking, and we got up to the top of this little hill, and we saw the people ahead of us saying, turn around, turn around. So we found that we were a little elevated. We turned around, and my God, there were thousands of us. It was just incredible. I'd never seen so many gay people together in my life. This is like, this long march, and then that sudden turn. It was just, everybody was applauding. It was just spontaneous. You couldn't help yourself. It was like, my God. And there were maybe 4,000 or 5,000 of us there that day. And for us, that was a feeling I'll just never, never forget. And where we are today, I mean, 1,750,000 people show up. But this is what GLF started. GLA, but mostly GLF organized that first Gay Pride March. And the BN that followed, everybody said, everybody who's standing up is straight. So everybody sat down, the marijuana came out, and there was a lovely, 2 hours of people milling around and having a good time. It was like a BN. There was BNs, in Central Park, and we really had one following the march. It didn't end with speeches. It ended with people hugging, kissing, people holding hands, and then dispersing.
Thank you, John.